We're talking Bats Human Harvest from 2007, directed by Jamie Dixon. And this is actually a sequel to the 1999 Lou Diamond Phillips movie simply called Bats. Now this movie is a made for TV, I believe it was for the Sci-Fi channel. And it's effectively a Predator ripoff. It follows the basic story beats of the movie Predator. And is really not associated as such with the original Bats movie. It's just a kind of a set in the same universe with an adventure involving bats, but it's different characters, even a different species of bat. But it follows that same genetically enhanced bats that was from the first movie, but it's really only tangentially kind of related. So the movie focuses on a team of Delta Force who are sent to Chechnya to basically extract this doctor who is doing some type of, research out there. You could probably guess where that's going to go. And this kind of Delta Force is accompanied by a CIA agent played by really the only recognisable face for me, Pollyanna McIntosh. And whilst they're there, there's various kind of human combatants, both Chechen rebels and Russian soldiers that they must face, but also the kind of mutated bats which have the ability to now cloak themselves like a kind of chameleon and the Predator. There's even a sequence where we have in Predator where Arnold kind of gets covered in mud and is able to kind of hide himself from the Predator. This movie also has that kind of same idea with a slightly different kind of liquid. So what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works with Bats Human Harvest. It's a lot lower budget than the original movie, which was actually a reasonable kind of production in regards to the budget that was spent on it and its kind of look. One of the notable differences here is the bats are all CGI, and we're talking 2007 CGI, so obviously bear that in mind. Whilst in the original movie, the vast majority of effects are obviously practical with puppets and things like that. Apparently they did want to use the puppets originally, but they wanted to use the same ones that they used for the original film, but they had degraded and couldn't be used, so CGI was used instead. I mean, because this movie follows the same basic kind of plot as Predator, it's a pretty action-packed movie on the plus side. There's lots of kind of shootouts and things like this. Various kind of masked goons for our Delta Force to kind of kill. Our Delta Force, people who end up kind of getting picked off, for the most part, have kind of heroic kind of deaths and everything like that. It's a little bit more gore, I would say, than the original movie, although it's still obviously a made-for-TV movie, so don't be expecting anything too gratuitous. But there's a couple of okay scenes where the bats seemingly kind of slice limbs off and things like this. But there are a couple of, I would say, practical effects that are used for kind of the body parts. There's for example, there's a guy with his face eaten off and it's just like a hollow skull, which is pretty good. So there's some kind of reasonable kind of practical effects, at least in some of the kind of the kind of human remains and things like that. The effects themselves, the CGI bats, I mean, they are a 2007 low-budget CGI affair. So they're kind of what you think. But I've got to be honest with you, I mean, I've seen worse. They're obviously CGI, but they don't look too bad when they're flying around in mass and things like that. They're dipping in and out. So, I think it's acceptable if you don't mind kind of this obviously kind of quite cheap CGI. And we do have to kind of obviously remember, it's a 2007 movie. So there is that as well. The movie is quite kind of punchy. It's very, it's fairly kind of action-packed once we kind of get in there, and it's very, very macho. This is one of those kind of very cheesy military-style movies which have, our main guy Russo. He's he's a lone wolf that doesn't like to kind of play by the rules and kind of do his own thing. And he's constantly kind of getting into trouble with his superior. But he knows what's right. It's kind of one of those movies. It's basically like your Chuck Norris kind of style action hero here. So it's kind of silly, over the top, very kind of macho in that kind of respect. It has a certain type of kind of fun, silly campiness to it, I suppose. And I believe it was filmed in Bulgaria, so it does have that kind of European kind of feel in regards to this kind of forestry area and and the location shooting and things like that. So, you know, let's talk about what doesn't work. I mean, yeah, it's obviously a massive step down from the original movie, which, as I mentioned, was actually a reasonably high-budgeted movie, you know, for that kind of style, you know, of film at least. So, yeah, it's a massive step down. The plot is Predator recycled. I mean, I'm surprised they went so close to the kind of the actual beats with Predator. You know, we have the bats can kind of blend into the environment by having like this chameleon-like ability, although that's never really used, to be honest. We see it really kind of used once and it's kind of forgotten about, so why introduce it? The fact that our main character, Russo, you know, is able to kind of hide from the bats because they are able to detect, you know, people, and he has a, I won't say what happens, but that he basically gets a kind of a way to shield himself, similar to Arnold in the original Predator movie. You know, a group of kind of macho soldiers getting picked off, the CIA agent kind of like escorting them. It's pretty much Predator. You know, it's films like this that have a writer credited to them, thinking, really? Did you really write this? It's just like, this happens so often. It's like, come on, you know. Hasn't anyone sort of said, oh, was this done on purpose? Whatever. So it's very unoriginal. The acting, I've got to be honest with you, isn't good. I mean, yeah, it's a kind of a bunch of low-budget actors for the most part, doing very, very macho kind of like levels of kind of dialogue here and kind of like silly kind of like action sequences. The budget, obviously, we don't really have people in proper uniform and things like that. Our enemies, some, you know, they're meant to be either Chechnyan or Russian, and when they're speaking together, they're speaking in English. So obviously, it's very just silly and kind of cheap. And I think the main critique, maybe for some, will be the bats are actually really not the main antagonist. I mean, we have less kind of actual action sequences and combat with the bats than we do with actual these kind of human antagonists. So it's more of an action film, but with a kind of a secondary threat of these kind of like these genetically mutated bats flying around and who kind of seemingly turn up and kill a bunch of people and fly off again and things like that. So it really doesn't feel like a bats film, you know, in its truest sense. If you look at the original movie, that was the threat. I mean, that's what the movie was all about. This one really isn't. So, you know, you might be disappointed. I mean, they do feature quite a lot in it, but it's, you know, the human, and this is a typical of kind of the Asylum and Sci-Fi Channel, is how to kind of stretch out the running time with cheaper action sequences by having human bad guys. It's a tale as old as time. It's something that they kind of do. You know, the combat sequences, it's more or less people standing in kind of static positions, kind of shooting, you know, quite a lot of the time, not kind of taking cover and things like that, just allowing themselves to get shot. It's very, very silly, very kind of cheaply done and very kind of cheesy. So, to rate this movie, I will say there is some entertainment value here. You know, don't be expecting anything certainly highbrow. And it's a bit of it is a letdown from that original movie, but it still has some entertainment value, albeit cheap, cheesy, and particularly predictable. So it's a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.